This video intends to clear up some ridiculous misconceptions about the political axis. The difference between left and right is the size of government. The bigger the government gets, then the further left you go until you reach totalitarianism, which is total government. Under totalitarianism, everything, whether it be the means of production, property, or life itself, is all owned by the government. As you move right on the scale, government gets smaller until you finally end up with no government whatsoever, which is called anarchy. Now, people have somehow managed to convince themselves that anarchy is left-wing. But if you remove government altogether, which is what anarchy is, then non-existence is obviously the smallest government can possibly get, which can't be anything other than right-winged. The major cornerstone of where you are on the political axis is ownership over the means of production. The means of production are whatever is used to produce the goods that we all use in life. For example, the car you drive requires a factory and raw materials to assemble. The means of production can either be owned by the government, meaning the government would own the factory, or they can be owned by private individuals, meaning a businessman owns the factory. Self-ownership is another cornerstone of the political spectrum. All the way on the right is a government that maximizes personal individual choice and freedom. The further left you go, the more onerous government gets. Somebody living under a totalitarian state may be jailed for speaking their mind or have their possessions confiscated or their income stolen for violating the state's many edicts. So in short, the further left you go, the more onerous government gets over everything. And the further right you go, the more freedom is maximized until you end up with no rules at all, or anarchy. If we start on the left, we have communism. Communism is when the government owns the means of production and property. So all property is owned by the government. So under communism, you cannot buy a car and proclaim that the car belongs to you. The car would in fact belong to the state. A notch to the right you have socialism. Socialism is government ownership over the means of production only. Under socialism, citizens are allowed to own property, but cannot own a factory or other means of producing goods. The means of production is owned by the state. Next, we have another one that people often get mixed up. A notch to the right of socialism is fascism. Fascism is private ownership over the means of production, but with government control, often referred to as state-run capitalism. Under fascism, the government can control businessmen's use of the means of production through a regulatory apparatus. Under fascism, businesses strive to maintain a close relationship with government through lobbying or funding of political campaigns, in an effort to get preferential treatment, whether it be through subsidies or unfair regulations levied on competition. You have to go a long way to the right of fascism to get to the next ism, and that's libertarianism, which in my view is really just capitalism. Libertarianism allows all property to be privately owned, whether it be the means of production or the house you live in. Libertarianism has a government, although limited in power. A libertarian government can have a court system, police force, public roads, etc., but economic activity is controlled by the free will of the individuals that make up society. Under libertarianism, individuals are responsible for their own success or failure and cannot look to the state for special privileges to make up for their own shortfalls or poor decision-making. There cannot be subsidies for businesses or special rights granted through lobbying because picking winners and losers is incompatible with the concept of a small government. Finally, all the way to the right you have anarchy, which is the complete abolition of government altogether. Under anarchy, all economic activity is controlled by individuals and there are no laws governing the behavior of individuals at all. Anarchy is the smallest government possible because there is no government and is defined as a state of disorder due to the absence of a recognizable authority. The further to the left you go, the more brutality you get. Totalitarian governments attempt to run the economy and need to move forward with their plans for society. For this reason, totalitarian states cannot allow the citizens to make their own decisions or run their own lives, because this will inevitably interfere with the state's plan. Totalitarian governments must get their citizens to behave in accordance with their plans, and the only way to get individuals to behave in such cohesiveness is through force, aka brutality. When it comes to totalitarianism, it doesn't matter if you have a nice dictator, because the only way for the government to move forward with its plans is to threaten their citizens with not so nice consequences for disobeying them. The further to the right on the political scale you move, the less centrally planned the economy is, and therefore the more free the people can be. So in a nutshell, the further left you move on the political axis, the bigger government gets. It puts more controls on individual behavior and the economy. The further to the right you move, the smaller government gets. There are less controls on individual behavior and the economy. I hope you learned something from this video. Please post it on Facebook or your blog and subscribe to my channel.